On today's episode, I'll take a look at all 8 divisions in the NFL, our first quarterly report, and where I am at on confidence in picking all of the divisions to ultimately not picking divisions because I'm just confused 1 month in. College football top 12. We'll spend a lot of time on Georgia and Alabama with Todd McShay, the Milroe rise, which is something I didn't see, but Todd apparently did. And then the Carson Beck conversation, a little bit more on some college ball than Jayden Daniels as well with Todd. So that's what we have. Now, just a reminder, we have this live show coming up. So every person on the show, except for me and Wargon, is already traveling as of right now. So we have no life advice. So I am sorry. Doesn't happen very often, but it was the only way to be able to pull this off so that we could have everybody show up and do the live show together. So we'll make it up to you as we always do. I'm going to do this quarterly report. So instead of just a normal week 4 recap, I want to take a look at being 4 games in for pretty much everybody here and looking at the divisions and going from most confident to who I think wins the division to least confident of the 8 divisions. And I may, during the exercise, talk myself out of the current order that I have right now. But that's what I want to do. And I'll also put in, because I think best win, best loss. It felt like a little bit more of a straightforward week. Maybe except for what happened last night where Baltimore just destroys Buffalo, but they have that in them. All right. So if I look at all the divisions and go, who am I most confident in quarterly in, I think it's the AFC East because of Buffalo. Yes, I know last night, but between Miami and the Tua situation, New England is not good. The Cincinnati part and then being competitive against Seattle was maybe this little trick of, is this team going to be all right? And predictably, now it'll be the countdown to when Drake May gets to actually start one of the games and takes over, which we knew was all going to happen. And as much as you looked at that Jets win again against New England, that was probably a little misleading. The Jets' defensive numbers are still pretty good, but that's the worst loss of the entire week yesterday for the Jets to lose to Denver. At one point, Bo Nix was minus 7 yards on 7 attempts. And his 8th attempt got himself into the positives there. So that is a weird team where the Niners lost. They look like they're not physical and not tough defensively. Then they put together a couple of weeks where they looked good defensively. Obviously, to hold another NFL team to 10 points is terrific, but you cannot expect Rodgers to score 9 and lose to Bo Nix in a head-to-head. So that's where Buffalo, it's liking Buffalo despite last night and just feeling like there's question marks for the second best contender in the Jets and kind of writing off, depending on what happens here with Tua. Like, you can't completely write them off, but I don't think New England's going to be much of a threat. All right. Baltimore, AFC North, second most confident with this one. Baltimore, number 1 in yards per play right now offensively. Pittsburgh clearly in first place at 3-1. I think Pittsburgh's a little weird. We know their defense is going to be terrific. It's been off the charts, right up there with all the other great teams defensively a month in. But losing to the Colts with Flacco, I think, is a very Pittsburgh thing. Even though Fields, you could look at that game and go, that's actually statistically the best game that he's had. He's moving the football. They finally got into the end zone. But I just think it was kind of a weird 3-0 team where it makes sense they would lose to the Colts with Flacco in at quarterback. And if you go from that, Cleveland, Cincy, both 1-3. There's maybe one stat here that continues to be a little bothersome for the Ravens, that they're giving up the 3rd most passing yards allowed per game. But I think the question you ask yourself is how many other teams in the NFL could do what Baltimore did to Buffalo last night? All right. I don't think that's a very long list of teams. And it's the best win, clearly, because it's so dominant against another Super Bowl contender in their conference. And Lamar moves to 17-5 in primetime football games. Okay, third most confident in Houston, winning the AFC South, 3-1. The week 3 loss is just nasty, 34-7 at Minnesota. You're going to have to get over it. At times it can happen. I think most of you are over it. CJ's line is basically exactly where you would expect it to be. It almost mirrors who he was as a rookie. So that feels terrific. This Nico Collins breakout season is incredible. He's now 100-plus yards over the number 2 receiver in total yardage receiving so far in the NFL this season. That's Malik Neighbors. I think he's got him by like 103 yards already. The defense gives up less yards than the point total. So when I look at that number, I go, that's something that feels like some of the defensive numbers will come towards them a little bit more because of the yardage stuff. Now, sometimes it can be a little misleading there, but there's just a gap between what they're allowing yardage-wise and then what they're allowing scoring. So then it really comes down to a lot of the rest of the division stuff here as well, because the Colts are probably going to be weird all season long. I know Richardson goes down with a hip injury and then Flacco's in there. They're going to have to play Richardson all season long to give him the best chance at developing and knowing what they have for the pick that they spent on him. So I don't think that that's a team that you're going to be super worried about. Tennessee hasn't won a game. And this Jacksonville stuff with Trevor Lawrence is 9 straight starts. I cannot believe it's this bad for Lawrence. The numbers now are regressing back to who he was as a rookie. I would think even if you didn't like him as a prospect, okay? Because there's always a few people out there that are going to zag on it. Even if you didn't like him, I don't think you would have ever thought the floor would be this bad. And it's so bad now. You're like, I would just, almost be happy, and not with the money they've spent on him because he got the massive contract. He got like the real one, like some of the other guys in the extension. But average would be exciting for Lawrence at this point. I still refuse to believe that this is how bad he's going to be. And it's not just him, but the team just can't get it done. By the way, only one team in NFL history has started 0-4 and made it to the playoffs. That's your 92 San Diego Chargers. All right, fourth most confident in picking a division winner. I'll say AFC West. Even if I like Kansas City more than Houston, which I do, despite some of the stuff about Kansas City that maybe I don't like right now, it's about the rest of the division. The Chargers are at least better than I think anything else that's behind the Texans. We allow that? Yeah. Between the Colts, Tennessee, and Jacksonville? Yes. Now, granted, the Chargers are hurt again. Nice effort from them defensively yesterday. And then I was looking at the Kansas City offense because they had the graphic up in this is just another weird game yesterday. Chargers get up 10-zip. They get a short field. Well, the touchdown drive, they went quite a ways after the fumble. And then the interception where it looked like Mahomes was looking for Kelsey. I don't know if he was too much faith in Kelsey making the play. It was kind of an overthrow. And then on top of that, you have Mahomes involved in the tackle. Rashee Rice, his knee, ACL, probably out for the season. So somebody who was definitely coming along as the number one receiving threat for the Chiefs is going to be out. So we're going to be playing this game all over again. But there was a graphic that came up during this game that said through 3 games, this is like the worst stretch for the Mahomes-led Chiefs. So we look at it after 4, where they pull this one out, score 17 points because it's the Chiefs, and you feel like they're always going to find a way to pull it out. The passing yards are way down per game. Third down conversion rate's about the same. The yards per game's down about 30, and the points per game are actually up a little bit, which tells me it's just the defense doing more work here. This defense is terrific. I don't know how bad it would have to be. I'd probably have to be like 10 weeks of them being a bottom half offense and being below for of all the things in sports that I'm not going to worry about, I'm not going to worry about their offense, even though the numbers tell me to worry about them. But that's why I have them fourth, only because they have a little bit more competition than, say, Houston or Buffalo in front of them. All right. I think we already did the Mahomes stuff. Yeah, he's on pace for 20 interceptions. So he's kind of on one this year. That would be 20 picks for Mahomes would be a lot. All right. All 4 divisions that I was more confident in all came from the AFC than the NFC. I don't know what that means, but let's try to figure it out. All right. So NFC West. Is it Seattle at 3-0? No, it isn't. I have new appreciation for Geno Smith. They're allowing 14 points per game. It's the 4th best. They have the lowest passer rating against them. The Seahawks defense here. Average passer rating so far right now is 67. So that means every quarterback somewhere in between Bo Nix and Caleb Williams. Not great. But I'm still going with San Francisco. It would take more than a 2-2 start for me to like Seattle better than them, even though the defensive thing is real. And again, I don't know what it is with Geno. Maybe it's watching so many other guys throw the ball short of the sticks all the time. That even when Geno had the resurgence here 2 years ago, I was like, is this real? Is this like, I have to think Geno's really good now moving forward? I finally got there. Later than others have, but I just kind of appreciate what he does in comparison to the way some other guys, maybe higher profile guys, play the position. So San Francisco, the 2-2 start, the injury stuff, it's been alarming. Purdy's basically in line with exactly what he did last year. The Rams defense is bad. Their injuries are bad. Arizona, who we got kind of excited because of a close loss against Buffalo and then Kyler playing better, their defense is falling apart. The opposing quarterbacks are they're completing, I should say, 79% of their passes against this Arizona D, which looked a little spicy, I'll admit. Maybe I just fell in love with the long sleeves and the athletes and everything with Arizona's defense, but opposing QBs are completing everything against this team right now. They're 1-3. All right. Now it's really going from most confident to kind of least confident, right? NFC North. I'm not handing it to Minnesota despite the 4-0 start. How about the top 4 quarterbacks in QBR? Josh Allen makes sense. Andy Dalton's number 2. So where does he go next year to make the playoffs? Sam Darnold, 3, and then Jayden Daniels, who we'll spend some time on here for the Commanders, is number 4. So Allen, MVP favorite, although you wonder what kind of data point getting housed in Baltimore will be. But obviously there'll be more games. We'll see, because I always think that there's a bit of a fatigue part with MVP voting. So you wonder if Allen would kind of get his turn, or if that damage that we saw last night will actually linger into how people see the vote. But again, if Lamar lights it up and they have the best record, maybe he wins another one. But Green Bay getting Jordan Love back, that was another, like, Minnesota puts it on him, stays aggressive the entire time. Green Bay, it felt a lot like the Georgia-Alabama game, where if you're down that much, you can throw any pass that you want. You're going to just start going any one-on-one that I get on the outside. I'm just going to put the ball up and hope my guy makes a play. And for Georgia, it was working out. And for Green Bay, it was working out here a bit. But it's not so much just being dismissive of a 4-0 start here from Minnesota that, again, it's like pretty remarkable based on season expectations and where their total was. Like, for teams that low on the Vegas win totals to be this good, this is pretty rare. But because of Green Bay's existence and Detroit at 2-1, and we'll see tonight with Detroit against Seattle, because Goff is way off from where he's been the last couple of seasons. I have a hard time believing with this amount of weapons that Goff is just now all of a sudden going to be incredibly disappointing. But it's really about the competition that remains in this division. And yes, I didn't mention Chicago yet, but Chicago's defense still pretty good, and I would think Caleb would continue to get better throughout the season with a nice win yesterday. All right. Second least confident, NFC South. This is just because it's a toss-up of all these teams. By the way, Tampa, who I've mentioned at times, I like, hey, cool, Tampa, but how serious do I take you as like a real contender of getting out of the NFC and potentially playing in the Super Bowl? I don't know what yesterday's game means other than maybe I have to buy into Tampa a little bit more, or just write off this talented roster of Philadelphia. You would think if there was one game that was on the slate for week 4 yesterday where a team would be really motivated, it'd be Philly against Tampa Bay. And that's not the case at all. They just smashed them. So outgained them 445 to 222. Turnovers part of the issue as well. But between Atlanta, New Orleans, Carolina, not much of a factor. I just think all of those teams are fairly even to me right now. I would be not surprised. I can't really say that about any of the other. NFC North was the first one where I got to, where I was like, if there were 3 teams still alive today and one of them won the division, whether it's Green Bay, Detroit, even with Minnesota star, would you be shocked by any of this? No. Even less shocked if it were New Orleans, if it were Tampa, if it were Atlanta. So the least confident I am in picking a division winner 4 weeks in is the NFC East. I know what I'm supposed to do with Washington here. Jayden Daniels has been, it's not more than advertised. No one could have possibly advertised this much. Like, I've heard some of the promos being like, well, he's a hot. You seriously thought a rookie was capable of doing this? And I would say, even after watching the week 1 game and then not really converting many trips to the red zone in week 2, was like, okay, he's still a little limited in what he's doing. And then that Cincinnati game just kind of changed everything. The throw where he takes the hit, one-on-one, big spot, had a lead, by the way. So he was still willing to be aggressive with a lead as a young quarterback about to get crushed. Like, that to me is like one of the most important throws I've seen from any quarterback this season. And then yesterday, he just completes everything. Look at some of these numbers as they just dismantle Arizona 42-14 yesterday. This is from Mike Sando, who we always like to reference at least once on a Monday. So Washington has now scored on 68% of its drives through 4 games. So that's the highest for any team through 4 games since they started tracking this in 2000. The Patriots scored on 58% of their drives through 4 games with that ridiculous 2007 squad. That's first half of the season offensively was like off the charts because they did regress a little bit kind of in the second half. So Washington's at a 68% clip through 4. Daniels has an 80% completion rate through 4 games. Wait, I think it's 82. I'll double check that. 82, if I pull this up here, because remember we were talking about this with Darnold's deal? Yeah, he's at 82. Geno's at 75. Derek Carr's at 72. Joe Burrow's at 71. Gardner Minshew's at 71. Justin Fields is at 71. Baker's at 70.5. Rounding up will make him another 71. It's just ridiculous. So Jayden Daniels is at 82. It's the best in league history through 4 games. However, as screwed up as Dallas is, as screwed up as Philly is, I don't feel confident enough yet to just say that it's the Commanders' division and everyone else is trying to catch up to them. After that huge Alabama win at home against Georgia, and what an incredible game that ended up being after a ridiculous start for Bama at home, we'll spend more time on college football with Todd for this episode. All right, so I still have Texas number 1. The coaches have Texas number 1. In the AP poll, Alabama jumped 3 spots. They are now number 1. I think the win against Georgia is more impressive than beating Michigan because of what I think of Georgia and what I think of Michigan. We can get into the particulars of, well, Bama did it at home and then blew the lead. Texas did it on the road, did not blow the lead, was dominant start to finish. So I understand the Texas argument. Hell, I'm putting Texas number 1 with this. I just don't have a huge problem seeing it split in both the AP and the Coaches Bowl. I just don't. And I think after the South Florida game, and then watching what Bama did to Wisconsin, and then the ability to get up 28-0 and how perfect Milroe was in the first half, just running all over the place. Georgia did a better job containing him there a little. But I cannot, and we're going to spend some time on this with McShay, I can't believe how bad Carson Beck was. Again, it could have actually been worse. Like stuff that he was throwing into, we can talk about it. Well, you're down, so who cares? Throwing a double coverage. Yeah, okay, sometimes. But, there's a bad possession. They get it right back. The first pass is almost a pick 6 where he just doesn't see another linebacker underneath. I don't know what it would be like for that group to kind of like spend time watching film. But it was so bad for Beck that I wonder in the evaluation of how limited, you've only got so many games to go on for somebody that's been at times projected to be the number 1 pick in the 25 draft. Is the film from that game, at least the first 30 plus minutes, is it so bad a team would say, actually, we're going to go in another direction at quarterback? Because it was brutal. All right. So I've got Texas 1, I've got Bama 2. And Milroe right now is the second highest passer rating in college football. Technically, Cam Rising is number 1, but if you're not playing, I don't know why I'd still be up there. Jackson Dart's just ahead of him. We'll talk Jackson Dart a little bit later. And then Ryan Williams, a 17-year-old receiver, just doesn't even seem like he's real. Like he's doing stuff now that you cannot, whether it's tipping the ball to himself and then running, or the touchdown play where he gets all these guys confused, he's able to somehow go backwards like he's skating out there. Putting him on skates may actually apply to him, as overused as that is. I have number 3, Tennessee. AP and coaches both have Ohio State. But Ohio State's still getting first-place votes. 4 first-place votes in the AP, 7 in the coaches poll. Dominant again in Big Ten play, 38-7 over Michigan State. No issue with that, other than I just think that with Tennessee's win at Norman, that should be enough to jump Ohio State But look, if you think Ohio State's better, that's fine. I had a hard time placing Georgia. Georgia is fifth in both polls. I don't have them there. I have Oregon fifth after Ohio State. So it's, again, Texas, Bama, Tennessee, Ohio State. And then I put Oregon fifth. I don't love it. I put Penn State sixth. I don't love it. And I put Georgia seventh. So my reasoning for this, it's not just as simple as undefeated. I guess I'm putting way more weight into how bad Georgia looked for most of Saturday night as opposed to actually coming back and taking the lead. That may seem unfair, but it's what I'm doing. Would I pick Georgia against Oregon? Maybe. But something with this Georgia offense, I really do think, like, they're hit on all these big shots, and I don't know if that's who they're going to turn into here, but I just found it incredibly alarming. I'd probably pick Georgia over Penn State, but whatever. This is what I'm doing with the rankings here as of right now. Penn State was a winner against Illinois, 21-17. It was 14-7. I was watching it, and Illinois had a 4th and 6. There's a penalty. Then they got a penalty, so it's back to 4th and 6. It was one of those games with one of those offenses with Illinois where, like, 4th and 6 feels like 4th and 60. I was like, they're not getting this. And if they get down another score, this game's over. And that's exactly what happened. Threw a pick six, 21-7 is 100-7 in this game. So Penn State's defense, Carter, just terrific, shows up again. So I've got Georgia 7th. Number 8, Miami. I was tempted to even put them ahead of Georgia in this one. Don't know that it matters. Don't know that anybody should care really all that much. Came back big time Friday night against Virginia Tech, who I kind of like Virginia Tech a little bit. And you've got the Cam Ward, just got to be a little smarter with the football. The first fumble was completely pointless, and then he had 2 more picks later on. So that's part of the makeup there. Missouri 9, because I'm out of teams, and they're 9th in both polls. Okay, this is the only part that might be interesting the rest of the way. You're like, oh, cool, I'm glad you did this. Even you didn't think it was that interesting. But here's the point. I don't think Michigan's better than USC. Maybe not even Ole Miss. LSU, I don't know. Maybe. Notre Dame's kind of an afterthought still, but they're creeping up slowly. Clemson creeping up slowly. Iowa State 4-0. BYU 5-0. BYU went from complete afterthought to ranked, and now they're making up for all the perception lost ground before the season started, right? So Utah loses, and they drop 8 spots, but it's still without Cam Rising. So you wonder if they still have this kind of outside chance of not winning the Big 12, but getting the benefit of the doubt if Rising comes back and they play better the rest of the way, and you go, okay, their loss is Zach Wilson's brother. So I just went Mizzou and then Michigan because, like, what's the point this point of the season? If they've beaten USC, you've got to put them there. USC beats LSU. So I put LSU 12th, and I left out Ole Miss, even though they're 12th in the AP, ahead of LSU, and 11th in the coaches poll, ahead of LSU and USC. So the coaches, for some reason, put LSU 3 spots ahead of SC already, which I think is a little weird. But if you're really trying to break it down for, like, who Ole Miss is, part of this is Kentucky waking up after that disastrous South Carolina game we've talked about a little too much. Jackson Dart at the end of this game was not what I expected at all. Like, he had a couple chances if they were trying to keep things alive for the touchdown to keep the field goal in play, and he starts taking sacks, and it's just a disaster there at the end, which is not what you'd expect from Jackson Dart. He'd been playing this game long enough. But their loss at home to Kentucky is worse than Michigan's at home against Texas, is worse than USC's at Michigan, and then LSU to USC neutral field. Yes, I think that's fair, unless Kentucky turns this all around and ends up like as a 10-2 team. Still think there'd be some work to do there. They've got Tennessee, Texas, and Louisville on the schedule. And don't forget about weird Auburn, who almost pulled it. Peyton Thorne, I thought he was back. Thought he was back in a big way. He is not back. Huge pick 6 at the end, and they end up losing to Oklahoma, a game that they were in control of much. So who cares? I don't have Ole Miss in my top 12, but I just think that their loss is worse than those other teams. All right. Talk with McShay. Got Todd McShay on a Monday again. I think we're going to do a lot of college ball today, but we'll see what other NFL stuff that he wants to do. Let's just start with the headliner, man. Bama, huge lead. Georgia comes all the way back. Bama pulls it out. The headline from that game for you is what?
I think it was Jalen Milroe's. He arrived. We knew what we saw flashes of what he was as an athlete last year, how explosive he can be. We saw the deep ball, how beautiful a deep ball he can throw. We saw the improvement after getting benched for the game last year and just like the mental toughness that he had. This year, start off the year, they've looked good. But to see him do this against, it was a record-setting performance in terms of doing it against an AP top 5 opponent, throwing the football, throwing with anticipation, throwing with the ball placement that he had, and having just not shy at all in terms of his ability to take off and run and knowing when to do it, how to extend plays. It was as complete a game as you could ask for. Now, you say kind of they shut it down in the second half a little bit, but like that first half is as good a half as I can remember a quarterback having in recent college football. So dynamic, so explosive against a defense that typically is so disciplined. His ability to get the outside, like Georgia's always great at setting a hard edge and forcing guys inside. Like, it was too much speed for them, and to make some of the throws down the field. And then even when Georgia makes the big comeback, and then 13 or 17 seconds they had the lead because of one play, the throw he makes, and obviously the stories of Ryan Williams and the catch he makes and doing, just things that 17-year-olds should not be able to do. But Jalen Milroe was the story for me. And, we could start talking about, is he QB1 for the 2025 draft? We could start talking about, is he the leader in the clubhouse right now for the Heisman? But forget all of that. Like, if you're an Alabama fan waking up and kind of assessing the situation, we've got the guy in college football right now is my mindset.
I can't believe you just mentioned Milroe as potentially QB1 for the 25 draft.
Yeah, we'll get to it. And it might not be on your podcast. And, we may have to do it some other places. But
well, everybody knows that I'm not the biggest Milroe fan, and I haven't been for a while.
And I'm not saying he is QB1. Right. I'm saying
right.
You wake up Sunday morning, and here we are Monday morning, and you start looking at it and say, you know what? Like, we're starting the quarterback, and I don't want to go on a long thing here, but quarterback development is different than it used to be. What you're looking for in a quarterback at the college level is different than what it used to be. The emphasis on the ability to create and having the ability to create big plays with your legs and driving the ball down the field. We've seen quarterbacks like Josh Allen. We've seen quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts. We've seen quarterbacks come in. We've seen it, we've seen it across the league in recent years. Lamar Jackson today isn't what Lamar Jackson was the first 2 years. So you're seeing these quarterbacks, they don't have to be completed prospects or projects. They've got to have something that's a special, unique trait. Josh Allen has it. Jalen Milroe had we saw the improvement he made from college to the NFL. Lamar Jackson has it. So even though he's not ready in terms of the mechanics and consistency and the ball placement and decisions, a total package yet, he has things that a lot of guys can't do. So when we start talking about Shedeur Sanders and how great he's playing at Colorado, when we start talking about Carson Beck, was he anointed too early on what basis for being the number one quarterback coming into this year for 2025 draft? When you start talking about Quinn Ewers before the injury and the improvement, why can't we throw Jalen Milroe into that discussion? That's as far as I'll go today, but I think it's something that we have to keep an eye on moving forward.
Yeah, my position would be that there was just like the job of quarterback in that Michigan game where you just needed him to be more on top of things. And you want to tell me that's not who he is anymore, and it's proven against Georgia, okay, maybe. I think he's the best running quarterback in college football. it's not just his straight line speed. The way he accelerates into these turns, or even Georgia, this defensive group thinks they have the angle on a running quarterback. And it's like, actually, you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And that part of it is entirely special. I always felt like the deep ball was just a deep ball throw and please somebody go get it. I think one of the coolest things about the first half is, and it's going to sound like I'm not giving Milroe enough credit, and that's fine. But I thought they were scheming up things where these throws were wide open too. And but to his credit, he was smart enough to know where it was like, let me take this throw instead of what I thought last year was his kind of default was he either ran or he threw it 50 yards down the sideline, hoping for like Burton to make a play. And more often than not, like Burton came up with it because I thought he was a really good college receiver last year. So let's look at the other side because I think the Beck tape is so quick, bad.
Like, you just mentioned it, so I just want to kind of put a bow on it.
Sure.
I don't think we give Kalen DeBoer enough credit. Like offensively, getting the most out of Michael Penix and what we saw from him, the transition of what Penix was at Indiana versus Washington, what Jalen Milroe was last year, what we're seeing this year. And there's a lot to it, but I'll say this, if you're a football fan watching at home, like watch the amount of motions and the effectiveness of the pre-snap motions. The clarity that he's able to create with those motions and the offensive, the personnel packages and the alignments, but specifically the motions, the clarity he creates for the quarterback, the launch points that he creates for the receivers, and the confusion that these motions present to the defense, that is a big element of why Kalen DeBoer has had successful quarterbacks, successful offenses, and it was a big element of why Alabama had so much success on Saturday night, and why what you're seeing the finished product, right? The wide open receivers, easy throws, just decisive quarterbacking. Well, how did they get there? Go back and really study those pre-snap motions and some of their alignments and some of their formations. They orchestrate a lot of that, and Kalen DeBoer deserves a lot of credit for that.
My favorite part maybe for DeBoer is just that, who knows what Georgia ends up being, because we're going to get to the Georgia part of this here very quickly. But as I'm watching that game, I'm going, okay, well, the cool thing for DeBoer is, post Saban, we know how hard it's going to be. And it's like if Georgia had come in there and put it on Alabama on a Saturday night where look, there's a lot of, I've been to that stadium a bunch of times, and that stadium is so spoiled, they can be over it a little quicker.
No question.
That was not the case. That was not the case on Saturday night. A couple of different people that were boots on the ground in there being like, this is the craziest I've ever seen Bryant Denny. And I'm thinking like, dude, you've been 10 times, this is the craziest. And they were up for it. And then of course they had to remain up for it because they blow the lead and the whole thing. So on the flip side, like part of me was happy for DeBoer because if you had blown that game being up 28-0 with everything that's on the line, then it turns into probably an unfair freak out. So it's kind of just nice that he has that one in his back pocket. Let's talk about Beck, because I think the film from this is so bad, it's going to be hard for some teams to get over, even if he lights it up the rest of the way.
Well, we talked about it last week, right? And I mentioned we didn't dive into it. We don't have to do a deep dive. It's pretty simple. I mentioned what I was seeing on the tape, talking to a couple NFL scouts. And to try to simplify it, just study the receivers on the receiving end of Carson Beck's throws. Watch how much work they have to do. That's the big difference. I think his ball placement and accuracy, like he's in control. His mental toughness has never been more on display than it was the other night. Like let's give some credit here. It is real easy to go in the tank as a quarterback after you make those mistakes, dealing with that pressure, 3 quarters in the humidity, everything's going wrong. Your receivers, by the way, I want to get to the receivers in a minute. The receivers are not making plays, they're not separating. And so all of a sudden, like to be able to hang in there mentally, there's a lot to love there. But if you're studying him just as a quarterback prospect and you're going back and studying that tape, and go back and study last year's tape and even early this year, the ball placement is not at that level when you're starting to talk about a quarterback as potentially QB1 in 2025. Receivers working for it, missing within the strike zone. And so that's the area he's going to have to improve in. And then under pressure, some of the decisions and the mistakes, just not up to that level. It is a damning first half and 2.5 quarters of tape for him. And it's something he's going to have to overcome the rest of the season, because it just, instead of going out there and at least playing at the same level for 4 quarters, or maybe like answering some questions about his ball placement and how hard his receivers have to work, he went and he just handed on a platter to NFL scouts what they were already thinking about him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just didn't know if that many people thought he was. I mean, he had 3 picks. He could have had 5.
Yeah.
He was not seeing things. And then for a long stretch, I was okay. I think he's like shook up here. So I don't know. I don't know if the scouts are going to go, that was really, really alarming, or you go, hey, road game in Tuscaloosa on a Saturday night, give them credit for coming back and competing. I mean, the fact that they, imagine if we're sitting here talking about them winning the game. Like, are we allowed to make any of these points about Beck? I just think for somebody like,
that doesn't change.
Well, you should have.
The tape's the tape.
Yeah. It like that one deep throw that he had to the left side after he'd already thrown a pick, and you're like, what are you looking at? And some of the big completions that he was getting later on, I don't even know. Maybe I give him credit for those. He had 2 in a double coverage with the safety coming over. I think one was completed, one was incomplete. And I don't know if I give him credit, because should I give him credit for being that aggressive, being down and being like, hey, you know what? Like, I hope my guy makes the play, and he didn't get burned on either of those. So part of me likes that he was aggressive, but then when you combine that to so many of the throws earlier on, I'm like, what the hell is he looking at? Does he not see the linebacker underneath? Does he not see that guy outside of that route? Was he just throwing, not caring about the safety coming over and closing on a sideline shot? I don't know. I don't know the answers to that, other than it just was messy, man.
I'll tell you the biggest concern I have for Georgia moving forward. And I'm not one of those Monday morning alarmists, and they should only drop a few spots. Like the second half, if they were able to pull out, if I'm a coach, Kirby Smart has so much to work with in terms of here, it's so clear cut. Here's where we have to improve. You got if you guys don't listen to us as coaches now, what we saw in the first half, we're going to see more of that down the road in big spots. And number 2 is, I am so damn proud of you. This is the effort. This is the culture. This is what we've built here at Georgia. So it's from a coaching standpoint, and Georgia can probably lose another game and still wind up in the college football playoff. So from a coaching standpoint, it's not the worst thing in the world to have to wake up on Sunday morning and say, all right, these are my circumstances. But from a big picture standpoint, just stepping back and looking at personnel, where's Georgia's difference makers offensively? That was my biggest takeaway. Carson Beck, yes, all the things we just talked about, but it's not all Carson Beck. Alabama played a lot of man-to-man coverage. Georgia's receivers just didn't win their one-on-ones. And this isn't something new. In recent years, they had Ladd McConkey, not an elite receiver, not a huge game breaker all the time, but a very consistent player, a difference maker, and faster and more explosive than people thought. But you could rely on him. Let's put it that way. They obviously, their tight ends have been outstanding, none better than Brock Bowers. So they've always had the guys they can rely on in big situations. Who are those guys this year? I look at it and it's scary to me. Now, systemically, big picture, who wants to go, if you're recruiting, who wants to go to Georgia? George Pickens was disgruntled. He's always going to be, that's who he is. But he wasn't happy with what was going on there. A.D. Mitchell transferred. Jermaine Burton transferred. Wide receivers don't love this offense, period. They'd much rather go to Ohio State, to LSU, to Alabama. Ohio State, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Smith and Jigba, even Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka, Jeremiah Smith now. Alabama, you go back to that 4 group that was sensational, kind of kicked things off with Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Devontae Smith, Waddle. Mechie was after that with Jamison Williams. Now Ryan Williams. LSU, you started go back to all the way to OBJ and Jarvis Landry, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, and now even Hiram Lacy and Aaron Anderson. And now even Texas, too. you can throw Texas in as the fourth one with Sark. So it's only recently receivers want to go play there. So that's 4 programs in the country where the elite of the elite are. That's my home if I'm a top prospect of wide receiver. Who's going to Georgia? And that's to me, for as great as they are on both sides of the ball at every position, quarterback, offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, defensive back, tight ends, they can recruit running backs. They can recruit all of those positions at the elite, like the highest level. But wide receiver, for the first time, we're seeing, we've always known it hasn't been elite, but for the first time, we're seeing, this is a major personnel flaw for Georgia.
Yeah, look, I mean, I've talked about it in the past, and they won 2 national championships while I was pointing out I don't really love their outside guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but it's different now when you don't have 2 NFL tight ends, or at least, who knows, because they still have recruited. Delpa's a big recruit and everything. And, I think Lovett's okay. And I was looking for him,
Lovett's a good player, but he's not even lad in terms of reliability,
And look, they couldn't run the football yesterday or on Saturday.
Yeah.
So that's the other part of it. So
how about that Alabama defensive front? You were right.
I love it. They're clones.
Looks a little, but I love the 23 and 22. James Smith and LT Overton, respectively. Tim Keaton the third. They're rotating. None of them are elite pass rushers or different, but those guys are stout. They're physical. They're frustrating. And then the linebackers, Deontay Lawson, Jahad Campbell. Lawson had the big 11-yard sack. Campbell had the interception. Those guys, they lead, 2 leading tacklers for Bama. That front 7, you wondered, is it still going to be? I mean, they got a bunch of dudes.
Yeah, and then there's number 4, the freshman Russillo, who got hurt in the Wisconsin game, but then he came back. He had the forced fumble. He had a sack in that one.
So his left arm punched it out.
I think Overton, as far as the bigger guys up front, that's kind of the one that you're looking at going
22, right?
Will he be the consistent edge guy that's bigger, that can do some of the stuff that we've seen for that position in the past? But I just feel like in the middle of the field against them is just horrifying.
Yeah,
they're chasing everything down. They're breaking up passes, and when linebackers are back there making picks on top of everything else. That Bama defense from the South Florida game to the second half of the South Florida game to now. There's just no concerns anymore. There's just no concerns. And I know they were taking shots at the corners. I think number 3 is somebody maybe you could throw on a little bit there for Bama, but now I'm just getting particular about, I think for most of the time they hold up and look, they took deep shot after deep shot there, and it was working out for Beck until he threw the pick in the end zone the rest of the way. Did you check out much of Ole Miss? Did you get to see enough of that?
I watched I was kind of going back and forth, and had, unfortunately, a couple things. I had not studied the tape yet, but Kentucky, I just laugh at people, when they talk about Kentucky and we need a new coach and all that. Stoops is always good for these, and they're so consistent. It's 9. We've talked about before, 9 wins every year. We can't get over the hump. But you're Kentucky, and you're winning 9 games every year, and you put up fights in these big games. Kind of, it's what you expect. If Ole Miss is going to lose, it's going to be a letdown game, a noon kick, or just not, not the hype train, not the excitement for the game. We talked about it last week. It was my screen to watch. I was dying to see against this physical defense. When you have an offense, it's tempo and fast and built on big plays, and I know they run the football and they have balance, but how are they going to line up for 4 quarters against a physical and discipline? That the biggest word for me is Kentucky is so disciplined. That's what Kentucky does to these types of teams. They're physical and they're more disciplined.
I would think they would have been able to get up for this one, though. I mean, even though it's early, but it's Furman, it's Middle Tennessee, it's Wake, it's Georgia Southern. Here we go.
I'm not saying they weren't up for it. That didn't jump out to me. I'm just saying, they've got a front runner feel. I'll just say, Ole Miss has a front runner feel to them as a program. There's a lot of social media. There's a lot of splash. There's a lot of recruitment. Lane Kiffin's the best in the country as a head coach in terms of like the excitement, and you're constantly showing up on my feed, and he's flying private planes into places, and he's stealing players, and like all that stuff. Not stealing. He's players that want to transfer NIL. It's legal now. I get it, but before I get in trouble, I'm just saying. Like,
I understand.
Those,
right,
right. If he was sitting right next to me, we could laugh about it. Like he just loves like those. Hey, here's more private planes landing here at this airport. So it just has a feel. I don't know what's it built on, and I don't know. It just while the outcome was surprising, and Ole Miss is clearly the more talented team, it wasn't shocking. It wasn't shocking that this is the kind of game I feel like they're going to lose every once in a while.
Yeah, I wanted to see them get up for this one, and they're still ranked in the top 12. And I did my rankings and I dropped them out because I just think this loss is worse than Michigan's loss to Texas, to SC's loss.
What's their schedule the rest of the way? I haven't looked at it. Do you have it? I'm just curious. Like, I mean, they have a one-loss season. They'd come back, right. But I don't know how treacherous their schedule is.
They're at South Carolina, which I think after the Kentucky game is no guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
They're at LSU. They've got Oklahoma, at Arkansas, home against Georgia, at Florida. They close at Mississippi State. So it's not brutal, but it's also not.
They could be a 3-loss team, though.
They could lose to South Carolina. They could lose to LSU. I would think they'd have enough offense to outpace Oklahoma.
But I can see them losing one of those 3 games and then losing to Georgia, and now you're a 3-loss team. And it's like, this is the year. Remember, like, Jackson Dart's back. You got, all the talent. Trey Harris is back. They recruited so well. Transfers, all of it.
Hey, were you alarmed with Cam Ward's game, or did you love his game on Friday night against Virginia Tech?
I was alarmed. I thought it was sloppy. And what did we talk about last week? Scout and I talked to. Like, let's pump the brakes a little bit. Supremely talented. There's no question. First round, yeah, sure. We can talk about first round, but like, let's factor history into this. That he's done this before. Washington State. I know it's still September, but the quote was unbelievable September. But when you get into conference play and it's week in, week out, how's he going to perform? And this was kind of, I felt like an early sneak peek to what scouts I've talked to are a little bit concerned about. Is it going to be consistency week in and week out? Is he going to cut down on some of the mistakes that puts him in a bind and can put his offense into a bind? So definitely some, rings some bells, some concern. I still love his game. I still think that he's grown and developed. I still think he's in the discussion with the top quarterbacks. It wasn't anything like that. It wasn't damning like Carson Beck in the first half against Alabama. But definitely need to kind of keep an eye on it. Did you think it was a catch?
Yeah. You didn't?
I couldn't tell. I thought the replays were hard. I thought the one from the one camera angle from closer to the goalpost looking in was the clearest. There were a lot of arms there and the ball kind of got lost. I was surprised. I honestly, if you just had to make a guess, if not based off of the camera angles, I would have said, I'm not sure it's a catch. I think there's a really good chance that it was kind of coming loose. But I also thought because it was ruled a touchdown on the field that it was going to be the play stance. I was shocked when they overturned it, to be honest.
Yeah, it felt like an assumption call. Because, how you see the replay and you're like, okay, well, that didn't happen. But then it's what do we know? Can you prove it? So you just never feel like the assumption call goes the other way. Heisman Eliminator first round went this way. Todd took Milroe, which I laughed at.
If I remember, was followed by, that's a mistake.
Yeah. And look at you now.
Thank you. I mean, where's Ceruti when I need it? We need some audio playback on that. I mean, I think we'll have it because Milroe's going to continue to put up numbers, and with that kind of win, I don't even know what the odds are now. If I look up the Heisman odds, I bet you he's third or something now. I think number 2. I would go ahead. I would say 2.
Yeah, no, you're going to say 2?
Yeah.
Well, Cam Ward was a leader. I'd imagine he goes. Oh, Milroe's now the favorite.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is it still a joke?
Look, I can't. I mean,
who's
look,
the joke now, Russillo?
That's funny. It's plus 200 now.
There you go.
Cam Ward was plus 350 the favorite before. Now he's down to plus 500. All right, so I can go first because you went first last week, and
so how's this work? I can keep anyone on my list that I want. I can discard.
You can keep anyone. You can just say, "Hey, I don't want to change anything. I'm good."
Okay.
Or I can make a move first. So
but you can't take one of my guys, right?
I can't take one of your guys unless you drop one of your guys.
Okay. Right? Then go ahead.
So
I just want to make sure that I was clear and that the audience is clear with the parameters of this situation.
Yeah. Well, because I have Travis Hunter, I'm not taking Shedeur, even though Colorado. Is there a new Colorado conversation to have here?
Yeah, they're running the football. Everyone's excited.
Do I take the Boise State running back? I don't know. All right. So I'm going to drop Beck. And I think I will take I didn't think I'd be doing this soon. I'm going to take Shedeur.
Okay.
So I have two I'm Mr. Colorado again now after I think I said they sucked 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. So I've got currently my roster is Jalen Milroe, Cam Ward, and Nico.
Yep.
I'm going to drop Nico for now. And I'm going to take Ashton Jeanty, who you alluded to, the Boise State running back, who, I don't have his numbers up. What is it, 470? No, it's more than that. It's like 600-something rushing yards. And
854. Yeah, he's like 200 ahead of everybody else.
800 and what?
845, actually. 10 yards per carry. I mean, they're just stupid. Caleb Johnson for Iowa is number 2. He's been great. If we still loved running backs as much as we used to, or if we loved Big Ten running backs, Caleb Johnson probably would get a mention before week 6.
Yeah, so I got Milroe, Ward, and Jeanty. And, it's going to be hard for you to come back. I mean, you got Hunter. Hunter, you're holding on to.
Yeah, but I like having yours. Okay, so I'm actually going to drop Shedeur and pick up Nico Iamaleava.
Okay.
So you played right into my hands.
I did.
I was going to defer and let you make the move first, hoping that you were going to drop Nico. And then I was like, no, just make a move so he doesn't think that you'll do that.
But you still have the stronger. I don't like to say Iamaleava every single week,
You just nailed it, though. You finally got it. So I'm happy for you. All right. One last thought before we let you go here, because we have to talk Jayden Daniels.
Yep.
This is, as much as anybody could like him, this is a lot. I'm wondering if Cliff's going to get another head coaching gig at some point. Because I was reading Sando this morning. It's I think Cliff took a little bit too much heat in Arizona. Maybe I'm a little bit biased because I like him. But I was like, well, he's brought in for a specific reason. And I think those specific reasons kind of worked out. And Kyler gets hurt all the time. So, and here he is. The week 1 Jayden versus what we saw. The Cincinnati game was the wake-up call of oh, my God.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the pace of their scoring and the completion percentage. How real is this? Because and I'm going to give you credit here, too. When we were debating all the Caleb Jayden stuff, I remember late momentum for you going, the more you look at it, the more you kind of talk to people about it. There's a real, Jayden's probably, there's a lot of people that felt Jayden was the guy over Caleb.
Yes. And I told you based off of last year's tape alone that Jayden was the guy. I told you the story about, being on the sideline with Brian Kelly and talking about how he was going to let it rip in the Tennessee game and they got blown out. But he's the light kind of turned on in that game. And from that point on, he started to trust his reads and trust himself. And I saw so much progress in his development in that year and a half span, right? Last year, his tape was significantly better than Caleb Williams. And so, when I was done with the tape, I remember getting on with you and being like, I don't know, man. It's tough because what I'm seeing, it's tangible versus Caleb. The special moments are so special. It's more of a toss-up. And then I started making the calls, as you alluded to, And there was real debate. And there were some teams, I told you flat out, like Jayden would be our guy if we were in position to draft him, but we're not. And so talking to teams up at the top, they're not going to talk about the quarterback because they're in position to make a play. But other teams like legitimately are like, no, Jayden's our guy. So that was real. Now let's get to what's important. I always look at it through the lens, okay, what can we learn? What can we glean from this? I think a couple things stand out. First of all, what the situation you go into. Mike Denbrock, now at Notre Dame, I believe, as the offensive coordinator, he was with Jayden. Similar system. So when you get to the next level, are you coming into something brand new? Is all the verbiage the same? Are the progression reads the same? Are they different? How big of a transition do you have from what you did in college to the NFL? He was in basically the same system. So that transition was not that steep. It was not that big of a learning curve for him. That's critical. Second thing that's critical, 55 starts. And it's so simple. And I get it. There are outliers occasionally, but not as much as you would think. Like CJ Stroud, everyone's like, well, he's kind of the outlier. It wasn't 4 years. It wasn't, 40 plus starts, but he still was 25 starts. And so, yeah, if you want to call him the outlier, that's fine. There's always going to be an outlier. But if you start to go back and really study the history, and this is one of Parcells' things, and I think the numbers have increased now with guys transferring and moving around and finding the right spot and getting them to play more. But I think it's going to, for me, if I'm recruiting and I'm trying to go out and get a transfer quarterback, come here, you got 2 years to play, or whatever you're pitching. You got one more year to play. Come here and make $1 million or $2 million in NIL money versus, and I know it's always about, well, get the clock started. And agents are always pitching to get the clock started, to get that second contract in the NFL. But you know what? If I'm making a couple million or $1.5 million or even just $1 million in college, there's not quite that, quite as much pull to go get that second contract, because I'm starting to see guys that have experience and have success early on in their career. 55 starts, 29 at Arizona State, I think, and 26 at LSU, or maybe flip-flop. So to me, that you've got to learn from those sorts of things. And Jayden, that experience shows up. The lack of a huge transition from one system in college to the NFL, it shows up, and it allows and affords success. But then just Jayden himself, if he can protect himself and stay healthy, it's only going to continue on this arc. And I'm not saying every week's going to be perfect and all that, but he's arrived. This is who he is. He's comfortable with his weapons. He's comfortable with his system, his accuracy, his ball placement, his movement inside the pocket, and his running skills are that's all real. That's not going to change. So keeping healthy at his frame with his mobility is going to be the key. You can say that for everyone. The scouts get so mad when you're like, well, if he stays healthy, no shit if he stays healthy, right? That's always the response. I have it ringing in my head because every time I talk to a scout, they're like, well, you said if he stays healthy, no shit if he stays healthy. We all think that. But there are certain guys that are more prone to injuries in terms of their play style, their body type. I worry about that, but I don't worry about anything that I'm seeing on tape right now. It's he's so advanced beyond a rookie quarterback. It's like this is his second or third year.
It's incredible. The numbers are incredible, and makes you rethink what is possible in the entire division. All right, Todd, thank you. We have to run. Thank you, Todd.
Love you, bud.
Okay, that'll do it for us. We will have a slightly changed schedule, but Wednesday show with Chris Long, that'll be on Wednesday because we're going to be doing it Tuesday. All right, and then we'll be back to normal on Friday. So please subscribe and watch us live on FanDuel TV or YouTube. Ryen Russillo Podcast, or Spotify.